with mouse shaking. Yep.
Yep. I'll give it a go.
Any other questions that people have got?
Yes, what's the name of that app, Shane?
It was called Mouse Locator.
Well, I would have called
And
it
it was
Locator, but what do I know?
Yeah, Mouse Locator, and it was from 2.5fish.com. And it's T2, digit 2, POINT fish, if I copy that link.
Oh, TWO, not 2.
Yes.
2.5.
I put a link in the chat just so you can see what it is.
But
it's quite old. As I said, it mentions Tiger, macOS 10.4, so it's dating back to sort of like 2005. So it's quite an old piece of software that they haven't updated.
It looks good, but I think the shaking one's better for home use. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if we have run out of questions, I was wanting to give people the opportunity of having a brief refreshment break around about now, just so if anybody needs to go and get a drink or anything like that, and I do for starters, so I'll just pause briefly at this point. Any last questions before we pause? Otherwise, when we come back in about 5 minutes, hopefully, we'll start talking about iPhones. Okay?
Good.
I'm confused. Right. Well, I'm back, but I'll wait till a few more people have reappeared before we start talking. And my cup of tea is not quite ready yet. The kettle took longer than I expected, so it's on its way. But I have the essential accessory. Just while we're waiting, I thought, Margaret, you might be interested in this one as well. This is yet another USB-C adapter that I've got. So you see it's got USB-C at this end. This particular one is a multi-display one, so it's got VGA and HDMI, which isn't particularly visible, so you can just see it there, and DVI, which is that horrible monster.
Yes, I've got those monsters kind of separately with adapters that connect to my Mac because I've got a HDMI connection to my monitor, which is a monitor TV to my right, and I forget why I was trying to connect it via the methods, but I can do that as well. So I probably won't get that one at the moment. It's sort of fairly retro now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically older monitors. HDMI is far more common these days. DVI is similar functionality, but it's much bulkier connector. I still use it because I've got an older 2007 monitor which has that plug on it, but I've got an HDMI to DVI adapter, and I'm actually going via an HDMI multi-way switch box to get into it.
I still remember all these giant connectors with screws at either end, very, very clunky. You know, you had to screw them onto the back.
Yes, well, VGA is one that's been there for donkey's years, so...
Sorry about that sort of thing.
Where's my timetable? Just finding all the right bits of information that I need, so I've got them all handy.
David?
Yep.
When you did the magazine, did you tone the black out this time? Because there's quite a bit of black in it this time.
There is some bits I did, like the page 3 I did, page 4 I did, but I think I missed the one on the front cover. And page 10 I did.
What was the blackout?
Right, because if you print dark images, it uses a lot of toner, which wastes a fairly large amount of toner. So what we usually do as a little trick is we set the opacity of the image to 75%, which cuts a quarter of the toner out.
Oh, gosh, that's a good idea. So,
but I missed the one on the front cover, so it looks like it's darker than I printed my own copy here.
Yes, especially the third phone across on the top there. That one is very black.
Yeah.
yes.
find the iPhone page.
All these kind of websites with so much black or notices with lots of black. If I change them, if I can change them, I do. Not that I'm doing much thinking these days.
Yeah, well, it's not so bad at the moment. We've only got 7 magazines I'm printing now. So, but before when we were doing them, it was quite diabolical.
Can you wean those 7 off?
No, because I've chosen to stay. One of them we can't because they're on a dial-up network. They don't have high-speed internet, so it's one member that we have that's on basically dial-up.
Yeah, that's fine. I presume. That
but also one of them is a public library, so they also get a printed copy of that.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
But it's not as bad as what it used to be, Margaret. We used to have quite a few. Now it's reduced quite substantially.
Oh yeah, I remember them.
Can I make a comment about the lost mouse or the cursor disappearing?
Certainly, yep.
Yeah, I think I had a few funny games at this once, but I couldn't find where it was. And I found if I took the mouse so that it actually went out of the screen and then brought it back slowly, it came to life again and you could see it. The other thing I did was I use a lot of the time this Wacom mouse on top of a tablet, and it's about 15 or 16 years old. It still works, but if I have a problem with it, I'll grab an Apple mouse, the ordinary Apple one. It's over in the pack over there. Put that on for a few minutes, and then I get back to my favorite, and it works. But actually, I haven't had any trouble for quite a long time. But I do remember doing that when I couldn't find it. So I didn't have to get a special program.
Yeah, I've used that dodge too now I come to think of it, Dennis, of pushing it up to the top, because you know that no matter how much you push it, it can't go any further. So it's going to be up there. If you just keep pushing it, you think, right, it's at the top now. And so all you have to do is keep an eye on the top.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or the bottom. Yeah.
That's assuming you've got a single monitor. If you have multiple monitors and they're not all the same shape, you can end up with interesting problems like the monitors are arranged so that there are corners that the mouse can get stuck in, which is the problem I run into because I've got basically my current screen layout. If I share my screen, I'll show you the layout. Find that button again, share screen, main, go into system preferences. I'll try it again, button, there we go. If I go into system preferences, go into displays, arrange, you can see that's my current screen layout. So you can see there that the one in the middle is bigger than the two on either side. The one on the right is my built-in laptop display. The one in the middle is a 25-inch Dell display. The one on the left is a 24-inch Dell display, but they're quite different resolutions. So the problem I've got is if I have the mouse ending up in the middle of this monitor and I go down to the bottom and go sideways, it gets stuck in that corner. I can't go sideways any further. So if I'm trying to get back onto my main monitor and I can't find the mouse, I know I have to go up to top and then go sideways because I've arranged them so that all three are aligned at the top.
What about that silverage on the right? Is that okay? Is it still the top of the screen? They still match?
Well, the one that's showing with the white bar indicates that's the primary monitor. That's supposed to represent the menu bar, but they've all got a menu bar on them, so that's just the way that Apple displays it.
Oh, that's right then. Yeah, otherwise you could hit the middle of one side, I suppose.
Yeah. So it's just I've got, when I'm normally running a presentation via Zoom, I've got one of the monitors set up the same resolution as our projector. So that's the one I use for the presentation. But tonight I'm not bothering with that because I'm just doing this off the cuff. So, right, shall we get started on talking about iPhones? So I'm going to refer to my magazine articles, which thank goodness I managed to get done a day earlier than I did last month because Apple keeps doing all these meeting announcements just in time for our meetings, and I have to then catch up rapidly to try and report on it all. So I didn't have to, I ended up running out of time to do the separate email, which I would normally have done. But by the time I'd written it everything kept changing, and I realised that it just made more sense to write my article and publish capital Apple, so I did it that way instead. So
that's the best place for it.
yeah, so I'm expecting, as I said in my article, I'm expecting that because Apple has not announced the new Macs yet properly, they probably will do so at some point. It's open. Some preferences is trying to show me something here. I'll just get rid of it. Hang on. Got it. Yeah, so as I said in my article, I'm speculating it'll be either the 10th, 11th for us, or the 18th of November are most likely dates. However, Apple might be really annoying and put it all the way into December, which would be really, really annoying for our meeting schedule, but to try and tell everybody about what happened. But at least at the moment, the likelihood is that there'll be a gap. There's a gap between the US election and Thanksgiving, and if they can fit it into the second week of those two, then that gives them enough time to announce it and have that event. So at the moment, Big Sur has not been released, and there's no clue when it's going to be released. The most likely scenario is they'll release it at the same time as that media event whenever it occurs, but it might happen before then. So at the moment, I don't know yet whether next week's Captain meeting won't be able to show Big Sur, but we've got enough to cover there anyway that I probably wouldn't bother. And next Wellington meeting is supposed to be our Christmas function, which we want to not have too much heavy duty stuff to cover. So that'll be a once over lightly, and then we'll pretty much break for supper. So I'm intending to run an extra Zoom meeting just for people that want to talk about new Mac related announcements, whatever they might be. Once we know the specifics. Okay, so iPhone. Oh, Peter Shannon, just some time to hear about iPhones. So what we've got is Apple have announced 4 new iPhones this year, or this season, if you like. This is the standard iPhone release season. It's a month later than usual, probably because of COVID-19. It would have normally been in September, but this year it happens to be October. 2 of them, the middle-sized ones, which are the iPhone 12 Pro and the iPhone 12, have been released already. So they got announced in mid-October, available for pre-order later that week, and were released yesterday, basically. Now, if I share my screen, I'll just show the page I've got open there. I'm looking at the compare page on Apple's website, so we can see them side by side there at the desktop. Yeah, that'll do. Desktop. Okay, so you should be able to see there. I'll just make that window bigger so it occupies more of the screen. So I've got the page open with the comparisons page on Apple's website. So if you want a copy of the link to that, which is in my article anyway, I'll just put that in the Zoom chat. Here's my mouse getting lost again. There it is. Zoom chat. Right. So currently I have selected the iPhone 12 mini, the iPhone 12 and the iPhone 12 Pro. But as you can see from these pop downs, you can actually pick a whole variety of different models. So you can do a side-by-side comparison of any 3 iPhone models going all the way back as far as the SE. And if your primary consideration is how big is these iPhones compared to earlier ones, that's quite handy, because what I can do is put the middle one next to an SE, so you see what the difference in size is. Or I can put the iPhone 12 mini in the middle and the iPhone SE on the left and the iPhone new SE on the right, and you see the comparative difference between them. So you can see that the iPhone 12 mini, which is the one of the 2 which has not been released yet, but will be early next month, is somewhat bigger than the SE, but smaller than the 2nd generation SE, which is the equivalent of, this one on the right is the equivalent of the iPhone 6, 6S, 7, and 8. They're all the same size. So that gives you a rough idea of where the iPhone 12 mini fits into the size of things. And just to quickly show you what else is on here, this gives you a sort of an overview of all the specifications. So you can see processors, battery life, features like Touch ID versus Face ID, storage capacity options, what the display does, size and weight, chip, camera, all those sorts of things. So it's a very useful thing if you just want to know okay, I'm considering these 2 or 3 iPhone models as a possibility. What do I get if I pick this one over the other one? So I've used this as a handy quick reference, plus I've got other references as well. So I'll go back to the 3 that I'm currently interested in, which is the 12. I'll just put the 12 Pro Max there temporarily, just to give you an idea of the size. So those are basically the 3 sizes of phones that Apple has introduced. However, the one in the middle, there's 2 variants. There's the iPhone 12 and the iPhone 12 Pro. So you can see from, if I toggle that back and forth, they're actually the same physical size, they're just different features. The most obvious one being the cameras. If you notice, one on the left's got 2 cameras plus various bits. The one in the middle and the right have got 3 cameras. So 12, I'll go back to 12 again, there's that, you can see there that these 2, the Mini and the 12, both have 2 cameras. And in fact, the iPhone 12 Mini and the iPhone 12 are effectively the same phone, just in a different size, because they've got the same technical features in every specification except for size, weight, and battery life. They do all the same things, the same camera specs, the same performance, same color options even. So if you're concerned that you'll miss out on stuff by getting the small one, the only thing you're really missing out on is a bit of the battery life. What does it work out to? 2 out of 17, about an 8th ballpark of the overall battery life. It's reduced by, because it's got a physically smaller battery. Okay, so those are the 3 models. Now, in my article, I had a convenient, so I can capital Apple as well, so I can see it, comparison chart showing pricing. I'll drag that window over here. Come here. I'll just bring this over here again. So here's capital Apple. I go down to my tech guide. There's the pricing matrix. So what I did there is I went through and looked at all of the iPhone models that Apple is now selling. Go back again. Come back on front of one Zoom at the same time so I can see people. Okay. So I've compared the prices of Apple still selling the iPhone SE 2nd generation. I've just abbreviated it to iPhone SE2 just so to which one we're talking about. The iPhone XR, which is a 2-year-old model, the iPhone 11, which is last year's standard model, and now the 4 new ones, the iPhone 12 Mini, 12 Pro, and 12 Pro Max. So you can see the capacities. Now, all iPhones start at 64 gig. And for most people, if you aren't doing a large amount of storage, 64 gig is probably enough. There are certain situations where you want more than that. Usual reason is you're recording a lot of video and you don't want to have to sync it all to iCloud or pay for iCloud storage or something like that, in which case you start to think about the higher capacity options. Notice also that the iPhone Pro, 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max now start at 128 gig. There is no longer a 64 gig model, so that's gone up from last year, where last year it was a 64 gig model for the iPhone 11 Pro. And I think I grumbled in my article that I had to buy the 256 gig one because there wasn't a 128 gig one. 64 wasn't enough for me. I'm using around about 80 gig or something like that on my phone. Now, that's also useful with the way I've organized this chart because you can see the price increment. If you look at how much an SE2 costs, you're basically paying $200 more to get the same capacity 10R, nearly $200 more to get the same capacity iPhone 11, just over $200 more to get an iPhone 12 Mini, another $150 to get an iPhone 12, another $300 to get an iPhone 12 Pro, and another $200 to get the really big iPhone 12 Pro Max in that case. You also see that they have a consistent pricing structure for capacities. You save $100 by going back down to 64 gig, and it costs you an extra $200 to go up to 256 gig, or $400 further dollars to get up to 512 for the Pro models. So they've got a nice regularly spaced pricing matrix. Sometimes they're a bit weird, they have exceptions, but this time it's all regular, which is quite handy. Okay, so I'll go back to the comparison page again. So we've got those. I'll go back to the iPhone Pro 12 Pro, which is more likely to be of interest. So if you're considering a new iPhone and you want to buy one of the latest models, the you've effectively got 4 choices, or you will have once they're all available. And as you can see from the pricing matrix, they're sort of structured from smallest to biggest in terms of how much they cost. So the main reasons you'd be considering various different models is one of the things I'd be considering, and I've been sort of adding notes as I go to one of my spreadsheets to sort of keep track of sort of technical differences between models and possible reasons you might want them. So the obvious reason to get the iPhone 12 mini is you want a physically smaller phone, but you also want a phone with Face ID and all the latest features. So, or the main ones at least. So the mini gives you a phone which is not a lot bigger than an SE, or it's a bit smaller than the current SE in fact, but it gives you Face ID, it gives you the dual camera system, and high-end performance because it's the latest generation of iPhone. If you prefer a sort of a medium-sized phone, the iPhone 12 is probably the one you should be going for. I've currently got an iPhone 11 Pro, and the iPhone, basically the iPhone 12 is a little bit smaller than the iPhone 11, if I put that next to it. You can see it's slightly shorter. But if I put it next to the iPhone 11 Pro, it's actually bigger than the 11 Pro. So it's sort of, the iPhone 12 comes about halfway between the other 2 models. In fact, can I find that page I had open? Mac Rumors had this very nice article, which had, now I can't find my mouse again, a diagram. You can see that. So that's got every iPhone model from the SE up to the iPhone 12 Pro Max showing you the relative sizes. So you can see the SE, then the 12 mini, then the 7 and the 8, the SE2, then the 10 and the 10S, which is actually the same size as the 11 Pro, I think. Yeah, because I've got an 11 Pro, it's the same as that size. The 12 and the 12 Pro are fractionally bigger again. The 11 and the 10R are fractionally bigger again. The 11 Pro Max and similar size ones are fractionally bigger again. And then the 12 Pro Max is the biggest one ever. I quite like that picture. That was a good one for them to publish. So if you want a link to that article, do I have, I've got the page open? Yeah, I'll just again copy that link. And I'll leave that in the notes so you can see it. Right, now Joe's made a comment here regarding the comparative size. It's worth noting, if you look at, say, the 11 Pro versus the 12, they've changed the screen dimensions. Down the bottom there, you can see it says 5.8 inch screen for the 11 Pro. It's the same, actually what I might do here is if I compare the 11 and the 11 Pro and the 12. That'll do. Okay, so you'll notice the 11 on the left is 6.1 inch display. The 11 Pro is 5.8 inches. That's the same size as the 10 and the 10S, by the way. And the 12 is 6.1 inches. But notice that the one on the right is smaller than the one on the left, despite the fact the screen's the same size. So what's actually happened here, and it's difficult to tell from these particular pictures, but if I have a look at the, not that one, the correct web page, you'll see the design. It's waiting for it to load. It's having trouble thinking about it. Come on, load the page properly, please. Oh, there we go. So you can see from that picture there, the new range of iPhones have flat sides, whereas the previous generation had rounded sides. So the overall dimensions have shrunk slightly because there's no longer an outer curve around the edges to compensate for. So there are a few millimeters saved on the top, bottom, left and right to compensate for the fact that the sides are now flat. So this design, as you can see there, is quite similar to the iPhone 4 and the 4S and the 5 and the 5S and the original SE. So they all had flat sides and never went to curved sides, and they've stuck with that for several years now. So effectively, this is a major design change going back to something which resembles earlier iPhones, at least in the body shape. they've got the iPhone 12 mini and normal 12 have got aluminium frames, but the 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max have got stainless steel frames, so they're all basically the same shape. So thinking about these sizes again, the iPhone 11 has a 6.1 inch display, but the iPhone 12 is physically smaller because it doesn't have the rounded edges, plus the gap around the edges of the screen is slightly smaller, the bezel size. If you can possibly see it in the picture there. If I zoom in a bit, if that's going to let me, thinking about it, the amount of gap between the left edge of the phone and that black border and the screen is fairly noticeable on that model, but on this model on the right, it's a bit smaller. So I think they've actually not only reduced the shape of the sides of the phone, but they've also made the screen get slightly closer to the edges. I'll zoom back out again. Yep, that makes sense. So even though the screen is like 0.3 of an inch bigger, the actual dimensions of the phone aren't changing all that much. If you compared an 11 Pro to a 12, for example. So if I was in the market to buy a new phone, I wouldn't have any problems buying an iPhone 12 having been used to an iPhone 10, 10s or 11 Pro, because they're all the same, pretty much the same width and only a fraction taller, and it's not enough to worry about. If I come down here and look at the dimensions, there we go. You can see there the width, the middle column, that's 71.4 millimeters. The one on the right is 71.5 millimeters. So that's not even noticeable. Whereas the 11 was quite a bit bigger. That was 75.7. So effectively, the iPhone 12 and 12 Pro are similar in size to the iPhone 11 Pro. Okay. Any questions at this point? All silent? Do they have color examples here? If you actually click on the color, yes, they do. That's cute. You can see as an example what each of the various different colors look like. So the new iPhones come in a new blue color. That one doesn't. But if I go back to the 12 Pro, oops, there is a Pacific blue as a new color. So you've got graphite or Pacific blue plus gold and silver. For the iPhone 12, you've got blue, green, red, white, or black. So there's a fairly good color range. It's typical that Apple's just basically given lots of color options for the mainstream model, but the Pro models are still looking a bit fancier, so they have a limited range of selected colors. They got rid of last year's midnight green option and replaced it with a blue option, which I think looks a bit nicer. But some people quite like the green one. Okay. What else can I comment on them? Release timing I've mentioned. So 12 versus 12 Pro, as I've mentioned in my article, the main reason you want to get the 12 Pro, it costs you an extra $300, and what you're really paying for is the camera. The 12, if I swap them around again, it makes the 12 one on the left. Oops, 12. Yeah, I've got the 12 Pro in the middle. You can see from the picture, if I make it a clearer one, the one on the left has got 2 cameras, the one in the middle has got 3 cameras. So the iPhone 12 has a wide angle camera and a ultra wide angle camera. The iPhone 12 Pro adds a telephoto camera. That gives you effectively the iPhone 12 has a 0.5 times zoom, optical zoom that is, by using the other camera, and the iPhone 12 Pro can either go 0.5 times or 2 times or 1 time. So it's basically a span of a range of 4 times in total for the one in the middle and a range of 2 times for the one on the left. But the effect you get is that if you are typically wanting to take mainstream photos and wherever you happen to be, any of them is fine. If you want to be able to take quite short range photos like you're in a cramped space, the ultra wide angle camera is quite good for that. If you want to be able to take photos of subjects that are a bit further away, you may find that the iPhone 12 is a bit limited because it can't zoom very far, whereas the iPhone 12 Pro gives you the extra zoom range. which I find quite handy from time to time. It's definitely not as good as a dedicated camera, which has got a longer lens or multiple times optical zoom. They have a lot more range than the iPhone does. But the iPhone for general purpose photography is very, very good. I've been happy with my 11 Pro and the one before that as well. Okay, what else can I comment? Aging, I think, is the only other thing I want to mention. So does anybody have any general questions on iPhone 12s or questions on selection? I might just stop the screen sharing temporarily so we can see each other. So we have a brief chat. Right, back to normal again. So at this juncture, anybody have any thoughts on iPhones or questions or areas they want to talk about in more detail? Peter, do I see a hand raised there? You need to unmute your microphone. Yep.
David, just the question of 5G, is it a significant factor at this stage in New Zealand?
As you may have judged from the fact that I said, oh, and it's got 5G in my article, no.
No.
From what I've been hearing from overseas is that 5G is currently worse than 4G in terms of performance. Over time, it will become more important. And as I mentioned in my article, there's two versions of 5G. There's the sub 6 gigahertz 5G, which is effectively just reusing the existing frequency bands and doing things better. That's not going to give you a substantial improvement in speed. And most people are finding that LTE or 4G is actually good enough already. So it improves things, and over time it will become more important. But at this stage, I say that's not really a major factor.
No.
The other version of 5G is the so-called millimeter wave one. That's the one that all the people who are complaining about 5G are probably thinking of when they're worried about what their phones might do horrible things to them, because it's basically like having a Wi-Fi network out in the street. It has a much higher frequency and you need a lot of cell sites to get good coverage. The intention of that is to have something like in highly populated areas, you have, for example, a series of small cell sites along every building on a street. So as you walk down the street, you'll have continuous coverage using this millimeter wave version of 5G. And it's a lot faster because it's higher frequency, therefore a bit more data in the same amount of time. It's also going to be useful in situations like stadiums. If you can imagine tens of thousands of people all in one area with lots of small cell sites, that makes more sense than trying to fit thousands of people onto normal cell sites. So I can see some advantages in those sorts of scenarios. However, it won't travel through walls, which means as soon as you walk into a building, you'll lose that 5G signal and it will drop back to the normal 5G or 4G or whatever else it's got available. Now, the other factor is that at the moment, the iPhone 12 series, all the models support the sub 6 gigahertz, that's the sort of the normal version of 5G, but only models sold in the United States support the fancy millimeter wave version, which means if you buy an iPhone 12 here, it won't support millimeter wave at all. Even if you go to the States with the phone, you have to actually buy the phone in the US to get that feature. So I imagine that over time that will become more standardized, but at the moment they're basically limiting it to US models, probably because it's not widespread enough elsewhere in the world. And even in the US, it's really only Verizon, I think, that's got it so far. And they only just sort of announced it at the same time as this Apple event and turned on most of it. The other factor is that 5G, we're into the second generation of 5G modems that are used inside the phone. So Apple basically avoided releasing any 5G phones for a year while all the other manufacturers started doing it, which means that Apple's avoided the first generation really, really bad power consumption problems. And they've gone in with the second generation, which are mediocre power consumption rather than really horrible. So the effect you get is that reports indicate if you turn on 5G mode on these phones, it results in a 20% hit in your battery life because it's still using quite a bit of power just to support 5G. So if you don't care about the benefits of 5G, which include a little bit of extra speed, you can turn off 5G mode in settings. So you can just reduce it back to being an LTE phone. That's perfectly reasonable. It still works fast enough. There's not really a lot of huge advantage to running it on 5G at the moment. So, and New Zealand's 5G coverage, I believe, is only just sort of just starting out. So it'll take a while before it gets up to speed anyway. So as I said in my article, if you're really wanting 5G and fast cellular networks, you might want to wait a year and not worry about this generation. But if you just want a new iPhone, there's no need to avoid it just because it's got that feature. It's a potentially useful in certain circumstances.
The one I was looking at, of course, was the SE2.
Yep.
That has the capacity to have a second SIM, which is not so
Yep.
important as we're not traveling so much these days.
No, the only, at the moment, it does have a potential advantage. You could have, for example, both be on both Vodafone and Spark, or any two networks basically in New Zealand, or have two accounts. So it's quite good for somebody who's got work phone and personal phone, for example, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Does the 12 mini say have that or not?
Yes, that's now standard across all iPhones from the at least the 10R onwards, I think. Yep. So that, and they're not really two SIMs. It's actually a eSIM, embedded SIM, and a SIM slot. So you can only use the eSIM at the moment with Spark in New Zealand. The other carriers haven't supported them yet. So you can, if you have one account is with Spark, you can set that up with the built-in one, and the other account can be Vodafone or 2 Degrees or something overseas. Or if you were traveling overseas, you could use the regular SIM slot for your local account and program the eSIM while you're overseas for whichever carrier you're using wherever you are, which is a bit of a moot point at the moment. But anyway, fingers crossed it won't be for too long.
Obviously, the other factor is the operating system. You drop behind one if you stick with the SE now.
Yes, you do. That might be an area where it's useful for me to bring up my one of my spreadsheets. Yeah, that one. Let me just drag that over here. And if I dig up share screen again, I've been sort of doing comparison charts and things, and I can show you some of these. Share screen, that one. Okay, so there's my working spreadsheet with all the sort of the features of the iPhone for reference. This is one I keep sort of every time Apple releases new products. So in the middle there, if I zoom a bit so it's easier to read, let's go up to 200%, that one. So looking at that reasons to step up a model chart, which is roughly in the middle at the moment. So you can see there, the iPhone SE2 has a 1-year-old processor. The 10R has got a 2-year-old processor, and the 11's 1-year-old and the 12's are 0 years old. So effectively that means the number of years of software updates, if I assume for argument's sake that Apple is going to support everything for 7 years, which we don't know until that happens, but looks like they're aiming that direction based on the 5S as a baseline, then an SE has effectively got 1 year less of software updates compared to the latest iPhone 12, but 10R's got 2 years less. So if you're thinking about saving money by buying a 10R, for example, or especially if you're wanting to get an even older model like a 7 or an 8, they're even further behind, so that means they'll get fewer years of software updates. Number of hardware years of support, I'm guesstimating based on when the model's going to be discontinued, because it's basically that point plus 5 years. So at least 5 years, because they haven't discontinued these models yet in all cases, but the likelihood is they'll keep selling the SE second generation for several years, so it's probably going to be more than 6 years for that one. And the 12 mini and so forth, they'll be selling it for a year, and then at least for the 12 Pros, they'll probably discontinue them, but they'll sell them for a year, and then they'll get 5 years of support after that. Interesting column here, this one if I highlight that, net cost per year. If you look at the price of the cheapest iPhone model of that family and divide it by the number of years of software updates, that's the number you get. So the iPhone SE2 is considerably cheaper on an annual cost basis, assuming you kept it for 6 years in this case. The iPhone 10R, 11, and the 12 mini are almost exactly the same price, even though they're like $400 price range for those particular models. Then the iPhone 12 is only a little bit more expensive, but then it gets a lot more expensive if you go up to the Pro models, because you're basically paying a large premium to get the fancy features from the Pro models. And of course, the Max is even bigger, so it costs more. So here are some of my thoughts I noted on why you might want that model. The obvious one for the SE2 is Touch ID. If you don't like Face ID for any reason, that's the only one that does Touch ID now. Apple's gone to Face ID for every other model that they sell. The 10 is the cheapest possible model with Face ID. The 11 is cheaper than the new models, and it's still pretty good, and it's a year newer, so it's probably a better choice. The 12 mini is small and light. The 12 is the new design, if you like that. And then if you want all the fancy features, you go up to the Pro models, where you've got better cameras, more storage potentially, extra features, brighter display, that sort of thing. Or if you really want the biggest phone with all the features, you go for the 12 Pro Max. So I thought that might be of interest. Just if I go to the rest of this briefly, that's my chart showing the sort of the major features of every iPhone model back as far as the iPhone 7. I haven't gone any further back than that. I have not yet confirmed whether the iPhone 7 will keep being available. I'd coloured that differently to remind me that it was still being sold by some of the carriers. So the ones that are in pink have been discontinued by Apple, but might be still sold elsewhere. The ones in white are older models that are still for sale, and the ones in yellow are new models that have just been released. So I use that as a handy little comparison. Yes, and Anna, yep.
What about the battery life of the 11 and 12s? Is it an improvement?
Here's the chart I've got that included in. The battery, if you look at these numbers here, the 12 mini is rated at 15 hours. Now this is the rating for playing video continuously. I'm not sure where, I think it's sitting there basically watching a video. If you were going to watch movies continuously on the phone, you can get 15 hours of life out of a 12 mini, 17 out of a 12, same for the 12 Pro, and 20 hours for the 12 Pro Max. If you go back a generation, the 12 Pro models are slightly worse than the 11 Pro models, but only just in the Pro, not in the Pro Max. The 12 and the 11 are the same. The 10R is slightly worse. The 10Ss were worse again. The 10 was worse again. So you can see at the upwards progression as you go to newer models, you're basically getting longer and longer battery life. The 8 drops way down to 14 hours. Where's the SE hiding in there? The SE2 is 13 hours. The SE2 is actually quite a lot less battery life in terms of operating time than all the newer models, like all the Face ID based models. So yes. The other thing that's of interest is I've got all the height, weight, etc. The water resistance. Notice that as you go down the table, apart from the 10R, they're generally improving. So IP67 and IP68 are particular standards that they're rated at. But I think the primary recommendation is if you dropped your iPhone into a certain depth of water, it would survive. It's supposed to survive for 30 minutes up to a certain depth. So the iPhone 7 and up have all got at least 1 meter. It gets up 2 meters by the time you get to the iPhone XS. The iPhone 11 Pro got up to 4 meters. The SE2 I don't actually have a number for, so I'm not sure what the story is. So I have to go and find it. The iPhone 12, they've got it up to 6 meters now, and it's the same for all of them. So deep end of an Olympic swimming pool is now safe. Dropping in the ocean probably isn't safe anyway, but yeah, that's an interesting factor. Yeah, obviously we've got newer processors. I've tried to keep track of the benchmarks. These aren't confirmed, so I've left some of them in italics. And camera differences get really complicated. So I'm not all that familiar with all the details of the camera stuff, but if anybody does have any questions, I can at least attempt to answer them sensibly. But I've sort of, as I've gone through this table, I've tried to add, okay, what do they do to the camera in terms of new features each time they do a new generation? And then I'm sort of trying to pick which one I can compare it to. So it gets complicated. What else do I have there? Oh, that was other features, just noting things and accessory prices and those sorts of things. Yep. And as you can see along the top here, I've done this every time Apple's released new products. I've got comparative charts of every model with the previous model going back now several years. So sort of as I go through these, every time Apple comes out with something new, I've got to go through and update all these spreadsheets again. I'll stop sharing there. So did that more or less answer your question, Anna? So effectively, the newer your phone you get, the more battery life you're going to get. The bigger the phone, the more battery life you're going to get as well within the same generation. So if you go for a max model is the biggest possible battery, so it's going to get the best battery life. The mini is the smallest battery, so it's going to get the smallest battery life. But as you go back into older models again, it gets a bit worse and it gets a bit worse and it gets a bit worse. So,
No, thank you.
and that's comparing new batteries. If you're talking about a phone, your existing phone, which is already 4 years old, for example, its battery is probably on the verge of dying. And I have recently been answering questions for people on that line, and just for reference, it should cost around about $100 plus or minus a bit, depending on the model, to replace the battery through an official service agent for all recent iPhones going back many years. So if you've got, for example, a 6S, which is still getting software updates, and you're going to spend $100, we know it's going to get 1 more year of software updates because it's running iOS 14. It might get another year after that. So if you were thinking about, do I replace the battery on my 6S or do I buy a new iPhone? Think of it in terms of that, going back to that chart I showed earlier with the cost per year, you've still got 2 years, at least 1 year, maybe 2. So it's actually cheaper in terms of cost per annum to get a new battery than it is to buy a new iPhone. But you might want a new iPhone for other reasons, such as I want better cameras or new features or something like that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Other iPhone related questions?
David, your chart.
Yep.
You've got the dates beside them, but you haven't got the year.
I did actually. It was just written as a 2-digit year. So I go back to that again. It was getting hard to read everything, so I made it squeezed it as tight as I could, and numbers refused to do certain options. Bear with me. Let's find the share screen option again. Desktop 2. There it is. So the left column was when it was introduced as the month and year. So down the bottom here, 12 max is November 20, October 20, etc. September 2019, and going backwards. The other one I did it actually with a. Did I actually write from that one? I didn't bother with that one. That's just this table I got it in. Unfortunately, numbers doesn't appear to have an option for. I want that to be date, no time. Yeah, its options were too limited. I wanted to sort of do Jan abbreviated month with a 4-digit year, but it wouldn't let me do that. I don't want the specific day of the month because I don't care about which day of the month it was released. So it wouldn't let me do the combination I wanted. So the closest I could get was to put the 2-digit year on the end. So I'd prefer it to be that, but then I've got to make the column wider, which is a nuisance because then I can't see as much information on the screen at once. So I prefer it. Try that again. Okay. So as long as I remember that for my own reference, it's not a big problem. But you can see the progression. I've got going back all the way back to the original iPhone in June 2007. So for that particular table.
Okay. So
David, where would you get a new battery? Who would you go to in Wellington for a new battery for your iPhone?
Any of the authorized service providers. The one I used for my own iPhone 6 Plus was Service Plus, who are located on Thorndon Quay. They generally don't have a lot of work as far as I can tell, and they're usually pretty quick. They can also do in-house battery replacements for iPhones. So whereas some of them might have to send it away to a service agent and then it comes back again.
Yeah.
And I got mine done back when Apple was discounting them, so it only cost me $50, but the price then went back up to 100 or so. Mine, I dropped it in and they were ready within about 2 hours or something like that. But it would vary a little bit depending on how busy they are, of course. But and as it's an official authorized service provider, they can replace it with a genuine Apple battery. There's no need to be worried about the quality of the battery. Whereas if you go to a random phone repair shop, you don't know what they're putting in there. And they also don't know how good their service technicians are. These guys have got the official instructions from Apple and the correct equipment and everything. Margaret? Was that just adjusting light, not question?
Well, I was just going to add that Service Plus will allow you, if they're busy, they will make a time with you to drop it back in. So you still can't look for 2 hours.
Yeah. Oh,
that's what it was they had to do.
I've got
just
a
reference,
so it could make sense to get a new battery. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
That would make sense. Did you say 7 Plus, Anna?
Yes.
Yeah, because that's still got probably 3 to 4 years of software updates left, so it's still worthwhile. Depending on exactly where Apple does the cutoff point. The other options apart from Service Plus are Obi, who are currently located on Hunter Street near the end of Victoria Street. They're also an authorised service provider. And Connect, who are on Adelaide Road if you're heading down towards Newtown, it's on the left-hand side, about halfway down the first major check straight of Adelaide Road. After you get past the BP, there are a couple of buildings after that, I think, on the left-hand side.
Yep.
I've dealt with them once. I've dealt with Obi never. I did deal with Magnum Mac before Obi became, well, Ubi as it was in Obi, but haven't actually used Obi for servicing, but other people have, and I don't know, I don't really have an opinion either way on them, but Service Plus I've used several times and they've been very good.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good.
Yep. Okay, any next questions?
Yes, David, you say in your text here, they've got, you say fragile because of the glass at the back, is that?
Yep. Yeah, all recent iPhone models, going back as far as the 8, have got a glass back because they use wireless charging and they couldn't have a metal back because that would block the charging signal. So the danger there is if you drop your phone, the usual risk is that you might break the screen. But with all the recent iPhone models, the back is also fragile because it's also glass. So the rear can get broken as well. The risk of breaking the rear is not as much in terms of loss of functionality, but it could get dangerous if the glass has sort of got shards or anything like that. But the main risk there is actually the cost, because replacing the front glass is relatively easy in an iPhone, at least for a service technician. Replacing the back is not. You have to replace the entire body of the iPhone and everything inside it to replace the back. So it's a lot more expensive to break the back of your phone than it is to break the front of your phone, because they have to effectively replace the whole phone.
Could they have hardened glass, or does that not conduct?
What was that, sorry, Margaret?
Could they have used hardened glass, or does that not?
Well, they have already used hardened glass, and putting a case on the phone makes a big difference because it protects the back in particular. Of course, it might still crack if your phone drops hard enough. Like I've got, here's my iPhone 11 Pro, just using the Apple 11 case. You can see, hopefully, that shows up in the camera. The lip around the edge provides a fair amount of protection to the screen. So if it falls flat on its face, there's enough of a lip there to stop it from, on a flat surface at least, from touching the glass on the ground, as long as it doesn't bounce too hard, or the surface is too rough. If it fell on, for example, a rough road, it might scratch it, but the back is much better protected because only the camera lens is exposed in that case, and that's their sapphire rather than glass. I didn't mention it yet, but the iPhone 12 series have actually hardened the glass even more than before, because they've now got little wee, what is it? Silicon or something like that. I can't remember what term they use. Ceramic, that's right. Little wee ceramic particles embedded in the glass on the front only. So the front, and it's already been tested by people, is actually a lot harder than it was before and a lot more robust. It's slightly better for scratch resistance, but it's a lot better for crack resistance. So if you drop your phone and it previously might have cracked the screen, now hopefully it won't. But it depends on how far you drop it, of course. It just means that the ranges of potential accidents which might damage the phone is reduced. But unfortunately, it doesn't help the back. If you drop it on its back, it's going to crack the back still.
Style cover, like this is a Samsung, but does it? Hang on, if I can.
You'll have a problem with your because of your
Yes, I know. I'm just
virtual background. We can't really see what you're holding.
Well, they're the ones that are like a book, but you can see part of the screen through it, and it
I see
tends
what you mean. Yep.
to sleep more quickly when you close the book. I don't know if Apple has its own covers.
Well, they do. There are many varieties of third-party cases. There are certainly similar ones to that for the iPhone as well. My partner's got one, which is just basically a little leather wallet, or not leather, and I think it's a fiber sort of one thing, but it's got like a Velcro strap on it, and you can open it up like a little booklet to see the screen of the phone. So that will certainly give you a lot more protection. I've never felt the need for it. I've dropped this phone, not seriously, about 3 or 4 times probably since I got it, and it hasn't yet scratched it or cracked anything. So, but I wouldn't want to drop it onto a road or something like that. It's only been on to a floor, and from usually hip height, not from head height.
David, would a cover defeat the cordless charging?
No, because the covers, at least it depends on the cover. A metallic one would, but Apple's leather and silicone covers do not affect the charging at all because they're designed to work with it. I also hadn't mentioned the new magnetic feature of the new iPhone 12 models. It's basically got, it's in my article, it's got a circular magnet. It's sort of about, if you can see the back of the phone there, it's about that sort of proportion of the width on the back. There's basically a circular magnet around about there on the newer models, and the magnetic puck, that you can buy separately, which is the MagSafe charger, basically clamps on there and will then provide a higher speed magnetic charging signal for the new phones. It also supports Qi or QI if you want, if you don't know how to pronounce it, but Qi charging, so they'll still work with existing chargers, but the magnetic MagSafe one that Apple offers is even better. And Apple's new range of cases for the iPhone 12 actually uses those magnets to attach the case onto the phone, plus it reproduces the magnet so that you can still use the magnetic charger on behind it. So they've actually got phone, potentially an Apple case, potentially the little wee optional wallet, which you can buy as a separate accessory, which clips on using magnets to the back, which you can put your cards into, things like your credit card, and if you got about 3 or 4 cards or something like that. And then I think you can take that off and plug the magnetic charger on. I'm not entirely sure if they can work at the same time, but the idea is that because with this one, it's only held on by basically I have to sort of lever it off to get the case off. So it's a bit fiddly, but I can do it. So there's a case that's not too difficult to remove. But with the newer ones, I think it still has a sort of a clipping arrangement around the edge of the phone. But the hang on, I'm just going to stop that from doing things to me while I'm trying to do this. There we go. Get out of there. It recognised and unlocked. But the newer one, it primarily connects via the magnet and then just has extra bits protruding around the sides to hold it in place more accurately. So it's quite a nice looking system for the new ones.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed some of the cars that they're advertising now have a pad. I've never seen one, but I've read about it.
I've been in one. What was it? It was a Toyota, not a Camry, but something similar to that. It was one of the higher end sedan models. It actually had a wireless charging pad in the central console behind the handbrake, and you just put your phone down on that and it would start charging while you were driving or whatever. And of course there's many third-party sort of accessory ones. Shane just showed me his one today, which it's basically a window mount module, which you then have it has a built-in wireless charger, which you have a cable which runs down to the cigarette light socket, as long as you can find a place to tuck it out of the way. And this particular one comes with a locking attachment for the phone, so it clips in and locks firmly, so it doesn't actually it can't fly out of it suddenly if you stop in a hurry or anything like that, which is quite a nice design. Yeah, what if you can see that, so that's the locking thing Shane's just showing now. What's the brand again, Shane?
Quad Lock.
Quad Lock, yeah. Shane got his directly from Australia, but there are a limited range available here from Torpedo 7, I think it was, wasn't it, for that particular brand? But there's
Yeah, so the cool thing about I like this one is if I upgrade my phone, I'll try and get it into the video. So basically this is an iPhone 11 Pro case. They've just released the 11s. So if you notice the cutout on the back of that one, basically if I stick it into the mount, I just do it 45 degrees and then lock it into the cradle. And then if I kick it back 45 degrees and kick it that way, so I can actually do, I'll try and get my camera, so I can actually do landscape or portrait in the same cradle. But there's a wireless charging gimbal that goes behind that allows me to wirelessly charge as well. And it's actually plugged in by USB-C to USB-A. So yeah, if anybody's around my car at some stage at one meeting, I'll show you how it actually works, but it is very secure. My other one that I had was just a straight pad with springs that you just push in. and the springs kept breaking, or it wasn't very strong. So, and it kept breaking. So this one's so much more nicer. So if I ever upgrade to a iPhone 12 or 13 or 14, the next models come out, all I have to do is buy the case for the new phone, and it'll just fit straight into my locking arrangement. So it's really good, nice and strong.
Thank you.
Quadlock was that brand name?
Yeah. So if you just do quadlock.com, there's a range of cases, mounts. They do mounts for your arm. So if you want to, you can lock it onto your arm. There's ones for push bikes, cycles, motorbikes. So there's a whole heap of arrangements. So you can basically use the same case, lock it into the same gimbal on different mounts for different vehicles. Yeah, there's a whole multitude of range to do them. Torpedo 7 in New Zealand do stock some of it, not all of it. But I did find going out of Australia was a little bit cheaper. Unfortunately, the wait for postage of 2 weeks was a little bit of a bugger. But hey, I saved myself a bit of money, and I didn't mind the wait. So yeah, so it was really good.
Okay, thank you, Shane. Right, any further questions on relating to iPhones, that is, or areas people want to diverge into? No? Okay. Have we run out of iPhones? I thought this other spreadsheet I've got here might be of interest. Model support, there it is. It's one I've shown in different forms previously. Let me just find my share screen feature again. I'll do that one. And let's make that full screen so we don't confuse you with the other stuff. I'll hide that right hand side bit. And we can zoom a bit. So what I have here, and of course now it won't fit because it's off the top of the screen. That's annoying. Oh, that's close enough. All right. So what I've done here is, some people may have seen this before. I've done a, here is the data behind the whole thing. I've gone lots of big tables full of release dates and calculations and things like that, but I've generated graphs out of it to make it easy to understand. So this version of the graphs is only showing models that Apple has already officially stopped supporting. So you can see the length from left to right of the graph indicates the number of years that that model was getting software updates in total. So the dark blue part on the left is the years the model was actually sold by Apple. The green part is the number of years it continued to get software updates after it was discontinued by Apple. And the pale blue bit is the number of years it got security updates after it stopped getting main software updates. So you can see, I've broken this down by model, and I can scroll down a bit further. I'm just starting at the top anyway. The Mac Mini has had, starting in 2006, it was getting sort of hovering around the 7-year mark. And then from 2009, it suddenly jumped up to about the 9-year mark in terms of how long each model got supported for in total, if you count security updates. In the iMac, we saw a similar pattern. The 2006 got around about 7 years, and the mid-2007 model shot up to 11 years. You'll also notice that the iMac exhibits this seeming sloping backwards effect, starting long, getting shorter, starting long, getting shorter, and getting shorter. This is because of the way that Apple cuts off old models. They do sort of a few years at a time. So as each model gets released, the closer your model is to the start of the cutoff point, the longer support it gets. So, and another way of looking at this, I've done a second set of graphs here. If I go back to the beginning, and again, zoom that to about the same. This time I've shifted the left axis, and the timeline is a bit obvious. So what I've got is an extra gray bit on the left, which was prior to that model existing. The one above it, or the two above it, or the three above it, is basically this a part of the same group in terms of when the software updates were stopped. So now you get to see the pattern more clearly. We got 7 years, then we got 9 years, then we got 10 years for Mac Minis. We got 8 years, then 11 years, and then it's dropped back to 10 years for iMacs. Varies depending on the model though, again. But anyway, if I go back to the first one again, So if I go down, look at this beyond this, you can see that generally speaking, Mac Minis don't last as long as iMacs. They tend to get shorter support. They're getting better in recent years, so it's not entirely clear. If I go down to the Mac Pros, the Mac Pros started badly again, but then have gone up to 11-ish years, so they're reasonably okay. MacBooks, which is the old polycarbonate white or black ones, started out around 7 years, sank back to 6 years, then jumped up to 9 and so forth. MacBook Airs, the first one was bad, the rest of them have been around about 9 or 10 years. MacBook Pro, the first year's worth were bad, and it's been around about 10 to 11 years the whole time. I've also done this for iPhones, and the iPhones are quite interesting because you can see 2 models that got 3 years support, 2 models that got 4 years support, 2 models that got 5 years support. The 5C is a special case because that's basically a rebadged iPhone 5, so it doesn't really count. But then the 5S has got 7 years of software support, and the 6 and 6S Plus got 6 years. So unfortunately, this anomaly breaks the nice pattern, but generally speaking, Apple was going up by another year every couple of years until the 6 broke the pattern. The iPads have been all over the place. The iPad 2 was the best in terms of longevity. The 3 was worse because it was basically the rebadged 2 with a better processor and bigger screen. The 4 got better again. The Air has got a lot better because that's 7 years. And the iPad minis, the first one was pretty bad, but the other 2 aren't too bad. They're sort of 6, 7 years. iPod Touches are terrible. I've owned several of them, and they're only getting 3 to 4 to 5, if you're lucky, years, compared to iPhones getting up to 6 to 7 years. So don't rely on long-term support for iPod Touches. Apple TVs, the first 2 models weren't too good. The 3rd model kept getting support for about 7 years. That was pretty good. Apple Watches, the original one only got about over 3 years. The next 2 series got about 4 years. Now, if I go to the 3rd one here, this one includes all the models, and I've projected how long I think each model is going to get supported for. So the additional models at the bottom of the tables and the orange bars indicate my guesswork to attempt to make the numbers look tidy from Apple's perspective. So I'm assuming going forward, Mac Minis are going to get around about 9 years, sometimes 10. iMac's going to get around about 9 years, sometimes 10. A couple of them have got longer than that. Mac Pros, probably around about 10 to 11 years. MacBooks are already finished, so there's nothing else to look at there. It's the original ones. MacBook Airs, there's a bit of an anomaly there with the 2017 model. You can see it's quite short. That one is actually the same as 2015 model, but and Apple didn't change the design at all. So I don't know yet what's going to happen for that one. I think they'll have to extend support for the 2015 one because otherwise the 2017 one is cut off way too short. So I'm guessing on that one that's only going to get a shorter lifetime than the rest. The newer MacBooks, we still don't know what the pattern's going to be for those because they haven't discontinued any of them yet. But MacBook Pros, again, we've got this cutoff. I'm assuming that the next cutoff is going to be 2015 models and earlier. Currently, they're up to late 2013 as the minimum supported model, so that's the last cutoff point there. And then it drops down to the 2015s. And I don't know what's happening with the newer ones yet. I'm just guessing on those. Won't have an idea for a while. iPhones, I'm assuming the 5S is the baseline. So from now on, unless Apple decides to extend their support again, they're probably all going to get 6 to 7 years of software updates. The SEs are special because they are effectively the same as the model above them, just delayed 6 months, so they get slightly less time than the rest. The 10 was late, which is why it's shorter. It's 2 months later, earlier than the others, or come out 2 months later. iPads, I'm in complete guessing territory there. They're all over the place in terms of what software, what processors they use. The iPhone 5, for example, came out in 2017. iPad 5 came out in 2017 with an A9 processor, which is the same one that was used in the iPhone 6S in 2015. So it was 2 years later. So I don't know how Apple's going to manage that in terms of software update support. It's complicated. iPad minis, I'm assuming are going to get a bit better. iPad Pros, I'm assuming are going to be better than iPads because they're more powerful, so they'll keep supporting them for longer. iPod Touches are terrible, as I said. Apple TVs probably around about the 7-year mark. We're overdue now for a new Apple TV, I reckon. There should be a new model already. And potentially they'll announce it at the same time as the new Macs, but it might come out next year or something like that instead. And Apple Watches, the Series 3 is still being sold So I think that the next Apple Watches are going to have more years of support than the earlier models, but I don't know yet because we won't know until one of them actually stops being supported again. Interesting.
The Apple Watch 3 was sold for longer than any of the others.
Which one, sorry?
The Apple Watch Series 3 seems to have been sold for a longer.
Oh, definitely. It's the current low-end model which has been sold for 3 years, whereas when the Series 2 and 1 came out at the same time, then they were replaced with the Series 3. Apple discontinued the Series 2 when they released the Series 3, but they kept selling the Series 1 for another year. The Series 3 then kept going for a third year when they released the Series 4 and then the Series 5, and now the Series 6. So Series 3 has already had 3 and a bit years, and it's going to end up with 4 years probably, because that's a sort of a live updating column, which every month that blue line will get longer. If I look at the graph again in 6 months' time, that'll be halfway through the next year. So the Series 3 I'm projecting is going to be sold for 4 years rather than 1 to 2 years with the earlier models, and then they'll probably discontinue it next year, and then the SE will become the cheap one. Questions?
I have one about.
Any further comments?
I have one about the iPod Touch. I mean, I've got a very rudimentary MP3 player, but why the hell get an iPod Touch if they're going to treat them that badly? Can't you just use your phone?
You can. Of course, if you've got the phone, then that's fine. The iPod Touch is quite a bit cheaper than an iPhone. It's
if you've already got the iPhone.
If you've already got the iPhone, that's fine. There might be cases where you want to, for example, set up a music player which you just leave sitting somewhere. My general advice on that is if you have any spare device, like if you have an older iPad, for example, or an older iPhone you stopped using when you got a newer one, that's probably a better choice than using an iPod Touch or buying one especially for the task. But
at home. I mean, I'm thinking about on the go, or in my case, out in the garden.
Where's my other one gone? Yeah, so if you just want an idea of what we're talking about, in case you're not sure, there is one of my iPod Touches. So that's, if you can see the side-on view of it, it's actually quite thin compared to my iPhone. So they're quite small. It's like an iPhone 5 or the original iPhone SE in terms of shape. It's a 4-inch display. That's the current model, the iPod Touch 7. The iPod Touch.
Some iPod Touches are much smaller, aren't they?
Yep. So the iPod Touch 6 looks the same. I've just got different colours so I can tell them apart. So that's I've owned. I've bought several iPod Touches, so I had them for software testing purposes. Basically the 5, the 6, and the 7 all look the same. The 4 and earlier looked more like an iPhone 4 or an iPhone 3. GS, I think. I can't quite remember what they were. I don't actually own any of those anymore. I used to own an earlier model. But I've generally been disappointed with them in terms of software support. They're physically small, and if you harken back to the earlier part of the discussion about smaller batteries, their battery doesn't last anywhere near as long if you're going to use it to run apps and things like that. It's good for playing music because the screen's not on, but for actually using them as an app device, they don't last anywhere as long as an iPhone does typically.
Pre-recorded tracks, for example, like a collection of MP3s, it wouldn't really matter how old it was, would it?
No. And they're all managed from iTunes or equivalent in Catalina, but you can manage your music library on your computer and transfer it to all of the devices. So the iPod Touch is just basically the last model of the iPod, since Apple had originally sold the traditional iPod, or now later called the iPod Classic, and the Nanos and the Minis and Shuffles and those sorts of things. So the iPod Touch is the last one of those left. It's really an iPhone without the phone. So it runs apps, does everything an iPhone can do except make phone calls or do text messaging. It will do iMessage, but not standard text messaging because it doesn't have a cellular modem in it.
And it will access the internet, like you can have it.
Yeah. So it's got a web browser, everything like that. So the other way of thinking about an iPod Touch is it's like an iPhone-sized iPad in terms of what you can do with it. So it does basically everything an iPhone can do except for the phone related stuff. And they're sometimes handy for running apps and things like that. I've got them mainly so I had something to keep as I bought them secondhand or from refurbished ones mostly, so I could have devices running specific older iOS versions for testing purposes. So I've got an iPod Touch running iOS 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and now 13. Just so I've got them for reference, so I can see, okay, what changed? I've got the two of them side by side if I need to. Here is my little container, biscuit container full of iPod Touches, which I've had at meetings before. Now it doesn't fit them all, but it only fits 5 of them, so I need a bigger container. So now I've lost the lid. I have to find the lid again. Oh, there. Yep. All right. Yeah. So specialised interest usually, but if you have something like a little set of speakers with an iPod mount in it, something like that, it's quite handy having something iPodish to just have sitting in there to play music. I have occasionally used that sort of thing. I also have an iPod Classic. For those who remember these little things, so there's my iPod Classic. So I tend to use that one when I'm going out on long road trips rather than using my phone because the battery lasts a long, long time in those ones. So it's still got a hard drive in it. They're that old.
And Nano, does that last the longest of all, or is it really just junk?
No, the Nanos are probably mostly dead now because the batteries will run out, and I think Apple stopped supporting all of them, so you can't even get replacement batteries for them. So the iPod Classic has stopped getting sold a few years ago, so I bought one of the last ones before they went out of business. So I think I've still got my original iPod Photo, which was a 4th generation one or something like that. So yeah, no, the good old days with iPods before the iPhone. Peter, you're muted again.
I just have a query looking at the screen. I've got the chats off to the side. Are they available to us after we've quit the current Zoom session?
If I end the session, they might go away, but you can copy the contents of that out at any time anyway. You can just select it as text and copy and paste it into something else.
Oh, I see.
They may actually be part of the video recording that Graham's doing. I'm not entirely sure what, depends on how he's got a screen set up. But you can also save it. If you notice down the bottom, I think there's a save chat command, a little dot, dot, dot button on the bottom right-hand corner.
Yep.
So you can actually save a copy of the chat.
I wonder where it goes.
It just saves as a file somewhere. So if I choose save chat, it says chat saved, and it briefly said show and finder. I don't know, didn't actually push that in time. So if I go save chat again, go show and finder. No. Yeah, okay. What it does is it puts a folder called Zoom in your documents folder, and inside that is a date and time stamped one for this particular meeting, and inside that is a copy of the saved chat as a text file.
Right. Okay. Good.
So what letter of the alphabet will it be under in the documents folder?
Z.
Okay. Zoom. Okay.
So documents, Zoom,
what about
and then
you can put it in Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive, Box, Microsoft SharePoint, or your computer. So
what are you looking at? Sorry.
Well, there's a file option, so I could actually put it on the desktop. I'm just looking to see, but there's nothing except cancel, so I don't know what to do. Is that for bringing up a file if I'm sharing my, I think it's for sharing.
Oh, sorry, if you click the file button, that's for sharing a file via the chat for other people.
Yes. Yeah.
You need to click the little dot next to it to let you save the chat. File button is for picking a file to send to other people.
Finally figured that out, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
It saves it as a text file called meeting saved, meeting _ saved_chat.txt.
Yep. And in fact, I think the recording auto saves the chat anyway. It's a feature when you do a video, when you do a recording, it keeps a file of the chat alongside the video of the whole meeting.
I'll have a look when I finished it.
Yep. Okay. All right. Any last requests?
Fish and chips.
I don't see it under Z. It's not in my Zoom folder, and it's not just loose.
I didn't have to choose anything, so
Have you actually saved it, Margaret? Or
Well, I thought well, it'd be a good point here.
you click dot dot dot. You click save chat. It says chat saved, and it's got a show and find a link next to it, which stays there for about 1 second. Just click it in a hurry.
Disappears. I'll do it again. So
Yeah.
dot 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 save chat. Well, chat saved. It says.
Yes, and next to it, it's got blue reveal in Finder. If you click that before it disappears, it will show you where it is in Finder. But I know just from saving it now, it's in your documents folder, then under Zoom, etc.
Oh, meeting saved. It'll be under M, you see. Right, thank you for that. I'm all set, thanks.
Yep.
I have 3 copies of it now, but that's okay.
Yep. Okay. Any other comments? Anything that anybody noticed that I forgot to mention? Joe's already highlighted the more screen is no edges issue, so yes, thank you, Joe.
particularly for me, I was trying to find the equivalent of my iPhone 6s Plus.
Right.
You know, so the 12 is the same more or less size. You don't have to go max or anything to get the same size, even though the phone physical size is still large. The screen size is, equivalent. Yeah. Something to remember, the edges.
I was previously on a iPhone 6 Plus, so that's the size of the 6 Plus compared to the size of the 11 Pro, and it was quite a bit smaller. I was actually finding that the plus size phone was too big for me. So the regular size ones is small enough now that it's actually quite comfortable
you actually
to hold.
get more screen real estate on a smaller phone.
Yeah, a little bit, because you don't have the borders at the top and the bottom and all around the edges. Yeah, it does make a difference. Yeah.
It's gotten dust. There's only 1 copy. Oh, hang on.
Yeah, I think it just saves the file with the same name each time, Margaret, so it will replace the file if you save it again.
So that's good. Yeah, got it sorted. I got quite a lot of saved chats in there that I didn't realise I saved.
Yeah, so I don't know whether it's done automatically, but I've saved several of the meetings, and each of them it's got chat.txt and various things. So that's because I've deliberately saved them.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware that I had, because I usually just do what you suggested and just grab the text and put it somewhere. Anyway, I find it splendid.
Okay. So looking ahead, we've got Cavity meeting next week. We've got probable Apple event middle of November. We've got the Wellington Christmas meeting, which we don't, apart from just talking about whatever Apple announced briefly, I'll hopefully only do about half an hour on that. I won't go into a lot of detail. That's the idea, just sort of give people an idea or ask any questions about it. And we'll try and do an extended supper and mostly be a social meeting. So the primary purpose of that one will be physical meeting again, but we're planning on having at least a Zoom attendees console that people can go and chat to people who are online who aren't actually able to make it to the meeting, kind of thing, for that one. And then, as I said, I'm planning on doing a one-off extra Zoom meeting just to talk in more detail about the whatever else Apple announces towards the end of the year. So hopefully that'll be early December if all goes according to plan. We don't intend to run any more help desks this year. We've been a bit short of them because of the COVID-19 business, but we've had a Kapiti one, we've had a Wellington one. If there is any demand for one, it's getting a bit tight now for the rest of the year to fit one in, unfortunately. So, and I'll be away for half of January, so it's not going to be practical to do it then. So the next opportunity is probably going to be March-ish for that. Any other thoughts from those who are still here?
No. There's a chance I might be watching that Zoom meeting from hospital.
Oh.
Depending on the date. Well, I'm trying to work out. I'm trying to work out if I need a new knee.
Yes, I can relate to that. I'm heading in that direction eventually. Okay, I think we can stop it there. Thank you all.
Thanks, David.
Cheers. Good night, all.
Bye all.
I will send you a link to the recording, David.
Okay, thank you. And I'll send you the magazine, Graham, when I get a chance, the edited version.
Where did the links end up? I've forgotten where the links to the recordings end up.
They'll go on our YouTube channel, which Graham's published links before. We don't sort of widely publicise it.
No, I think of, I should have hung on to that or filed it somewhere better.
The last couple of them I forgot, so I'll put in the next one if I remember.
Ah, right, okay. Well, we could possibly just send an email out to members, reminding them where it's located. That might be an easier option. That way it's easily found. If you can just draft something and send it to me, Graham, I can send it off to everybody.
Hang on a second, I'll put it on the chat thing now. Just give me a second. I'll find it.
Oh, that's easy.
Now I'll have to save it again.
Yeah.
No doubt it will replace the ones that are there.
Now,
Okay, thank you, David.
I'll just say if Graham's going to put it in the chat here or
I'll find it
at the time.
Yep, that's right. I'll wait. That's fine. I'm now having a cold cup of tea. It does have milk in it, though.
I think I did finish my cup.
And the cup is not cracked.
Okay.
You typing, Graham?
I'm trying to find, it's not my standard YouTube link. It's WelMac is in the name. I'm not sure exactly how. When I put in WelMac, come up with somebody else. I'll tell you what, I'll send an email to David and he can pass that on. Might be just
no worries, Graham, it's all right. I mean, I should be able to find mine. I just need to line everything up, but it could well be buried amongst kind of ordinary stuff. That's all. I should have isolated it soon. I maybe find that I have done it, but I just am not sure. Yeah. Okie dokie. Very good. I will sign off too then.
Me too. Bye.
Okay, night all.
Nighty night. Thanks again. Oh, and Shane, before you leave, shall I send that sub in for Bruce?
Yeah, I've actually just I've emailed him tonight, the actual membership request. He actually used to be a previous member way back in 1988. We did actually have a member. He was actually 0263. So he was actually the 263rd member. Now I rung the phoner up, but he'd actually popped over to the neighbours. But Erin had answered the phone, who must be living at the house. And she did say they moved to Auckland in the 80s and then came back again. So, because I saw the entry in there, Ralph Bruce, and I was just querying to make sure it was the same person, and it was. So I just basically updated everything. So got rid of the old addresses, old phone numbers and stuff, but kept his membership when he first originally joined in 1986. So I've actually left that in the database. But when he sends me the, hey, Erin did say something that you were going to gift him the membership or something. So he has received the email.
So I'll just do it for number 0263. But since it's virtually the end of the year, I don't know whether it should.
Yeah, we don't really want to have any new memberships in February. We've already got 29 membership requests in February already. February is our big month, so we don't really want membership join there. But if you do it this year, so like we're halfway through this month now, if you do it now, it's going to be from November. So it's not going to be a problem because it'll basically be from November to November. So he'll still get his year membership.
Yeah, sure. I just wondered if it was more convenient to have a starting off with membership, say in January.
Yeah, no, it's just we've got heaps in February already. We don't really want any more in February. That month is so big sending out membership letters.
That's the AGM month. I thought January. If you'd rather it's November, then that's okay.
It really doesn't make any difference, Margaret. It used to be that everybody was a member in February. That's the reason we got a big batch there. But when we switched to floating membership, rolling membership years rather than fixed membership years, everybody who joined after that basically is anywhere in the year. The only month we don't have memberships is December, because we're basically shutting down for that month.
All I had to go on is when I was paying it myself, it seems to be January. So I thought I was probably doing it with everyone else, but no, I must be doing it on my.
David, if you get in the chat, you'll find the link to our YouTube channel.
All right, there we go, Margaret. So if you now save your chat.
Okay, show and finder, and I should actually see that it's there. Yep, okay, that's just very good. Thank you. Extended.
And the latest one that's on there is September 2020 Zoom meeting, which will be last month.
Right. Okay. Thanks again.
Margaret, it was actually 0293. Sorry.
0293.
Yeah, not 263. 293. So it's 0.